Chapter 1. A Man of Routine. Walt Granger's alarm clock buzzed every morning at 5:45 a.m., but he always woke up at 5:40, 5 minutes before the chime, just as he had for decades. At 67, muscle memory and habit had become second nature. The bedroom was dim, the air cool with the hum of the ceiling fan. Linda was still asleep beside him, curled away, her back to him like always. He watched her for a moment. Her hair, once chestnut, now silver at the edges. The years had been kind to her face, but not to her warmth. He rose without waking her, padded to the kitchen, and clicked on the coffee machine. It gurgled and hissed to life as he reached for two mismatched mugs from the cupboard, hers always white with little blue flowers, his a heavy old ceramic one that said "One Dad," faded and chipped at the rim. As the coffee brewed, he looked out the window. Dawn still hid behind the trees, the morning mist hanging like a veil over the yard. The same oak tree stood tall in the back corner, branches stretching like weary arms. He remembered planting that tree the day Hannah was born. He poured Linda's coffee just the way she liked it. 1 spoon of sugar, splash of cream. His black. Always had been. With 2 mugs in hand, he returned to the bedroom and gently placed hers on the nightstand. "Coffee, hon," he said softly. A faint grunt came in response. She didn't open her eyes. He leaned down, kissed her on the cheek. Her skin was cold. She didn't stir. Walt smiled anyway. Downstairs, he sat at the table alone, flipping open the morning newspaper out of habit more than interest. He thumbed through stories about economic forecasts, celebrity scandals, and a local road being repaved. Nothing he hadn't seen some version of before. At 6:30 sharp, he stepped into his garage, where his 2007 pickup waited faithfully. The same creak in the driver's door greeted him, and he slid into the seat like he had 10,000 times before. His lunchbox sat beside him, packed neatly by himself the night before. Turkey sandwich, apple, chips. Linda hadn't packed his lunch in years. The drive to the plant was 22 minutes. Same route, same red light at Maple and 3rd. Same old man with the cane who shuffled by the bakery window every morning. Walt gave a little wave. The man didn't see it. At work, the guys had already started gathering near the break room. Most were younger now, sons of former co-workers, fresh-eyed and energetic. They called him Gramps or Old Reliable, and he didn't mind. It was all in good fun. "Morning, Walt." Jim, the foreman, called out. 2 more weeks, huh?" 11 days, Walt said with a chuckle. "But who's counting? Better stock up on sunscreen. You're headed to the golf course after this, right?" Walt smiled politely. "Maybe. Or maybe I'll just sit on the porch and drink my coffee slow." The plant was loud, the work repetitive, but Walt liked it. Machines made sense. Bolts fit into sockets. Blueprints told the truth. There were no pretenses, no hidden meanings. A machine either worked or it didn't. People were far more complicated. By noon, he was tightening valve seals, the same type he'd worked on in the 80s when he first started. There was something comforting in the familiarity. While others moved on to management or office jobs, Walt stayed on the floor. He liked using his hands, solving real problems, not sitting through meetings about synergy. He called Linda during his break, like always. She didn't pick up. Again, he stared at the screen, the call ending after 4 rings. No voicemail, no text. Just the silent echo of disinterest. He stared at his lunch, the sandwich now a little soggy, the apple bruised. He still ate it. When he got home that evening, Linda was at the kitchen island, wine glass in hand, laptop open. "Hey," Walt said, setting his keys on the hook. She didn't look up. "Hey." He walked over and kissed her cheek. She flinched slightly, then turned her head away as if something had startled her. He stepped back, forcing a smile. "How was your day?" "Busy. Rhonda called in sick again, so I had to cover her entire end-of-month reporting." "That's the 3rd time this month, isn't it?" She shrugged. "She's going through something. Anyway, I'm exhausted." "Dinner." She glanced at him like he'd spoken in another language. "There's leftover lasagna in the fridge. Or order something." "I'm not hungry." Walt opened the fridge. The lasagna was 2 days old and dry around the edges. He microwaved a slice, then ate it standing up at the counter while Linda scrolled through her phone, her face glowing in the blue light. Upstairs, he passed by Hannah's room. She'd moved out 3 years ago, but still treated the house like her personal storage unit. Half her things were still boxed in the closet. She came by sometimes, usually when she needed money or laundry done. Last week, she dropped by while Walt was fixing the gutter. You know, she'd said, eyes on her phone, you really need to stop with the Mr. Fix-It act. Just hire someone. I don't mind, Walt had said, tightening the clamp on the ladder. Keeps me busy. Yeah, but you're like, what, almost 70? Don't want to break a hip. He had laughed at the time, brushing it off. But the comment lingered. Hannah had a way of making things sound like jokes when they weren't. Jace hadn't been around in months. He lived in the city, working at some startup Walt couldn't keep track of. When Walt called, it was usually voicemail. He remembered one Sunday, a few months back, when he asked Jace if he wanted to come over for dinner. "Aw, Dad, it's just I'm busy, man. Stuff to do. Maybe next week?" Walt had asked. Yeah, maybe. That week never came. Still, Walt kept reaching out. He climbed into bed that night. Linda already under the covers, her back to him again. "You tired?" he asked. "MMM. You sleep okay last night?" "I guess. I was thinking once I'm retired, we should take that trip. You know, to Maine. The one we talked about all those years ago." Silence. Then, "We'll see." Walt lay back, hands folded over his chest, staring at the ceiling. The fan spun lazily above, blades cutting the air in slow rhythm. His heart felt heavier than usual. Not from age, for something else. Something harder to name. He closed his eyes. He believed he was retiring into peace, love, and rest, utterly unaware that his family saw him as weak, boring, and disposable. Chapter 2. Is that what you think of me? It started small. A forgotten kiss. An unanswered text. A slow erosion of shared habits, like bricks being pulled quietly from a foundation he thought was solid. Walt noticed it on a Thursday morning. Linda, usually halfway through her coffee by 7 o'clock a.m., left hers untouched, the steam curling upward like smoke from a fire he hadn't noticed burning. "Didn't like the brew today?" Walt asked, placing his thermos into his worn leather satchel. She didn't look up from her phone. "Oh no, it's fine. I'm just not in the mood." He hesitated. "Everything okay?" Linda glanced at him, lips tight. "Yes, Walter. Everything's fine. You don't have to analyze everything I do." It stung, but he smiled through it. "Just checking." She slid her chair back, grabbed her keys, and tossed out as she walked past. "Girls' weekend this Friday. Don't wait up." That was the third one in 6 weeks. Once a year, maybe twice, he understood. But 3 in a month and a half? "You're really making the most of retirement before I even get there," Walt said, laughing gently. She stopped at the door, her back still to him. "Some of us need space, Walt. Maybe you should try it sometime." The door shut harder than it needed to. Walt stood there for a moment, hands still resting on the back of the chair. The coffee pot burbled softly behind him. He tried to brush it off. Marriage had its ebbs and flows. He'd read enough about that. Stress, hormones, age, they all stirred into a bitter brew sometimes. Still, he couldn't shake the unease growing in his gut. That night, Hannah stopped by, without calling. "Hey, Dad," she said, already halfway inside. She dropped her oversized purse on the hallway bench, phone in hand. "Is Mom here?" "Not yet. Girls' weekend." Hannah rolled her eyes and wandered into the kitchen. "She still does that crap?" Walt tilted his head. "You sound surprised." "She hasn't been on a girls' weekend in, like, a decade," Hannah said, opening the fridge. "At least not with her actual friends." Walt furrowed his brow. "What do you mean?" Hannah shrugged and pulled out a bottle of white wine. "I don't know. Just seems like she's always busy with someone you've never heard of." He watched as she poured herself a glass, his wine, without asking, and made herself at home. "You still working nights at the salon?" he asked. Hannah sighed. "Ugh, yeah, for now. But it's just temporary. Honestly, I should have gone into marketing or something. People throw money at influencers with no talent these days." Walt nodded slowly. "Well, you always had a knack for creativity." "Yeah," she said flatly, scrolling her phone. "Can I crash here tonight? My place is being fumigated." "Of course," Walt said, though he wasn't sure if she was lying. It didn't really matter anymore. Hannah only came around when she needed something, and lately, that was often. He tried asking her to dinner, but she waved him off. "I already ate," she said, sipping wine and texting someone simultaneously. You should really get Wi-Fi that doesn't suck, by the way. By the time he finished his own dinner, a reheated baked potato and leftover chicken breast, Hannah had disappeared into her old room. Door closed, music low and pulsing. He sat in the living room alone, the soft hum of the TV doing little to quiet the static in his head. 2 days later, Walt was organizing old project files in his garage, most of it sentimental junk, really, when Jace called. "Hey, Dad." "Well, hey there, stranger. You still alive?" A short laugh. Yeah. Been swamped at work. Everything all right?" "Yeah, I was actually wondering if I could ask you for something." Walt chuckled to himself. "Go ahead. I've got a couple big bills this month. Rent, utilities, car maintenance. I'm a little short. Just wondering if you could spot me 1,000 or so. Just for now." Walt hesitated. Jace had borrowed money 3 times in the last year. He hadn't paid any of it back. "Son," he began, "you know I'll always help you, but this is starting to feel I'll pay it back. I swear. I've got a bonus coming next quarter." Walt closed his eyes. "All right. I'll transfer it tonight. You're the best. Seriously. No problem. Maybe you can come by for dinner next week." "Yeah, sure. Let's plan for it." They didn't. That evening, Walt heard Linda in her office, her new reading room, she called it. The door had been shut for over an hour, and he could hear faint murmurs of her voice. He passed by to head upstairs, pausing as he caught a sudden edge in her tone. "He's signing everything over soon anyway." Silence. Then muffled laughter. His stomach dropped. He leaned closer, his hand hovering near the doorknob. The rest of the conversation was too low to hear. Another voice, a man's, crisp, confident, responded with something indecipherable. Then Linda giggled. Actually giggled. It had been years since he'd heard that sound from her mouth. Walt stood frozen for a long moment, his breath shallow. Then, as if struck by a sudden chill, he turned away and climbed the stairs slowly. He tried to make sense of it. Signing everything over, surely, she meant the retirement paperwork. They discussed his pension, the house, the inheritance plans. Maybe she was talking to their financial advisor. Maybe the giggle was just nervous laughter. Maybe it was nothing, but it didn't feel like nothing. The next night, Linda was gone again. "Book club," she said. "We're reading that Colleen Hoover thing." Walt didn't question it, just nodded. Later, he sat at the dinner table with cold leftovers, meatloaf, and mashed potatoes. He'd cooked for 2, hoping maybe Linda would be home, maybe they could talk. The house was too quiet. Then, from down the hall, soft laughter spilled from Linda's closed office door. She was home, but she hadn't told him. She hadn't come out. No greeting, no interest in dinner, just silence, and laughter for someone else. Walt stared at his fork. His hand gripped it tighter than he meant to, knuckles pale. In the dim light of the dining room, he sat alone, untouched plate in front of him, while behind the closed door, his wife laughed with someone he couldn't name. Chapter 3. The dinner that wasn't. The suit felt tighter than he remembered. Walt adjusted the collar again in the car mirror, hands shaking just a little more than usual. He hadn't worn this charcoal gray blazer since Hannah's college graduation, and even then, it had been stiff and underwhelming. Linda always said she preferred him in blue anyway. Now, as they sat in silence at a red light, he glanced over at her in the passenger seat. Her face was angled toward the window, lips pursed, tapping her phone. She hadn't said more than 5 words to him since they left the house. Her makeup looked perfect. Not for him. "You look nice tonight," Walt offered, voice hopeful, casual. Linda didn't look up. "It's just dinner, Walt." He nodded. "Still, it's a big night. 45 years. That's something." She hummed in response, still scrolling. Silence returned, thick and undeniable. Walt turned back to the road. The engine hummed beneath the weight of 1,000 things unsaid. He tried to steady his breathing, to focus on the honor of the night. His colleagues had gone all out, or so they said, booked the nicest banquet room at the Crown Elm Country Club, printed a fancy little menu with his name in gold script. A celebration of Walter Granger. 45 years of excellence. He should have felt proud. Instead, he felt hollow. When they pulled up, a valet opened Linda's door. She stepped out, offered the young man a thin smile, then walked inside without waiting for Walt. He gave the valet a polite nod and followed. Inside, the room was already buzzing. Old friends from engineering teams past, project managers who had once relied on a steady hand, young hires who still called him Mr. Granger despite his insistence on Walt. Applause broke out as he entered. A few cheers. Champagne glasses raised. He smiled, genuinely at first, then more out of muscle memory. "There he is," came the booming voice of Frank Henderson, his longtime colleague and friend. "The man of the hour." Walt laughed and shook hands. "Frank, you old bastard. Still got that limp." "Only when I want sympathy from my wife," Frank grinned. "Come on, let's get you seated." Linda was already at their table, table one, smiling as she accepted a glass of champagne. Hannah sat beside her, dressed in an expensive burgundy dress that Walt didn't recognize. Jace slouched in his seat across from them, phone in hand, a half-smirk already on his face. "Dad," Hannah said, giving him a kiss on the cheek. "Wow, you really wore that suit." Walt blinked. "Yeah, what?" She shrugged. "No reason." Jace added, "You look like you're about to give a lecture on thermostats." Linda sipped her champagne, eyes unfocused. "Let's just get through tonight." That stung. Walt tried to shake it off, smiled at a waiter, thanked him for pouring water. Frank clapped him on the back, motioning toward the head table. Soon enough, speeches began. His boss, soon-to-be ex-boss, gave a long-winded but heartfelt toast. Mentioned Walt's dedication, his tireless work ethic, his loyalty. "This is a man," he said, "who never once took a shortcut, who believed in integrity, who gave everything for his company and his family." Everyone clapped. Walt stood slowly, the room suddenly too bright. His knees ached, but he stood tall. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper. His speech. Nothing fancy. He read it softly but clearly. "I've always believed in showing up, doing what you said you would. That's what my father taught me, and it's what I've tried to live by. Through 45 years, I never missed a deadline, never walked out on a commitment, and never forgot why I started working in the first place, to build something for my family. I've had a good life. A simple one, maybe, but honest. I hope I've made you proud. Thank you." Applause again. Longer this time. Even Linda clapped, though her hands barely touched. Walt sat down, reached for his water. Linda leaned in, her voice suddenly clear, cold, and loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "And now, here's your real gift, Walter." She pulled out a manila envelope from her purse. Thick, heavy. Hannah grinned, pulling out her phone as if ready to capture a TikTok moment. Jace raised his glass. "Surprise, Dad." Walt stared at the envelope. Linda pushed it toward him. "Divorce papers." The room went quiet. Hannah giggled. "Your pension's ours. You get nothing, loser." Someone gasped. Jace clinked his champagne glass with hers. "Congrats on 45 years of wasting your life." Walt didn't move. Not at first. He looked at each of them, one by one. Linda, her expression smug, self-satisfied. Hannah, smirking like a mean girl who finally pulled off the prank of the year. Jace, eyes glazed with entitlement. Walt's gaze settled on the envelope. His hands didn't shake as he reached into his coat pocket again. From inside lining, he pulled out a pen. The same pen he had used to sign every contract, every blueprint, every major decision in his life. He clicked it, opened the envelope, flipped to the last page, signed his name slowly, carefully. His signature was still strong. He capped the pen, slipped it back into his coat, folded the document, placed it gently back into the envelope. Then he looked up at Linda, at Hannah, at Jace. "Understood," he said simply. He stood, straightened his jacket, and walked out of the banquet hall. No one followed him. Not a single soul. Chapter 4. Ghost Protocol. The cold air outside the country club stung Walt's face, but it was nothing compared to the numbness in his chest. The world felt quieter. Still, as though time had paused to let him decide who he was going to be now. He didn't look back. Not once. By the time he reached his car, the valet jogged up behind him. "Sir," your wife said. Walt handed him a crisp 20, eyes forward. "She's not my wife anymore." The valet opened the door in silence. Walt slid into the driver's seat and exhaled slowly. The interior smelled like leather, pine-scented air freshener, and the faintest trace of change. It was over. Everything familiar had been stripped away in one moment, like flesh from bone. And yet, he felt clear. The moment he started the engine, a new protocol kicked in. He didn't go home. He drove directly to a small office building on 43rd Street. It was nearly 11 o'clock p.m., but the lights were still on because Walt had made sure they would be. Behind a nondescript glass door was Harrison and Keene Financial Trust Services, and inside his old friend and attorney, Philip Keene, was waiting. "Damn," Phil muttered, looking up from his stack of papers. "They actually did it?" Walt nodded once, face unreadable. "They really did." Phil gestured toward the table. "Then it's time. Walt, Saturday, execute everything. Tonight." What followed was precise. Cold. Clinical. Every file had already been pre-reviewed, pre-notarized. Over the last 4 months, Walt had been planning contingencies, not out of paranoia, but out of the creeping instinct that the people closest to him had changed. He didn't want to believe it, but he prepared anyway. He signed a trust document, transferring all jointly owned funds into a private irrevocable trust under his sole control. He reclassified his IRA as a private annuity, with no accessible cash value to divide in the divorce. He logged into his main bank account, transferring the remaining liquid funds into offshore and domestic accounts connected to the trust. He handed Phil a USB drive. "The house deed." Phil blinked. "You sold it already?" Walt nodded. "Last week. Closed under a holding company I set up in Delaware. They won't trace it unless they really dig." "Damn, Walt. You planned this like a military op." He didn't answer, just kept signing. By 1:20 a.m., everything was in motion. "Phone?" Phil asked. Walt powered it off, slid it across the table. From his pocket, he pulled out a burner phone, activated with a new SIM and no linked metadata. A single number saved. Phil's. He stood up slowly, joints stiff from the long sit. "You sure you're okay, man?" Phil asked gently. "This is a lot." Walt paused, then looked him in the eye. "They left me at that table like I was a joke. So now I'm rewriting the punchline." He left with nothing but a duffel bag, a prepaid debit card, and peace. 3 days later, Linda, stretched in bed, yawning, disoriented. Something felt off. She reached for her phone, dead. The charger wasn't connected. Annoyed, she sat up and glanced toward Walt's side of the bed. Empty. Not just empty, stripped. The nightstand was gone. The lamp. The book he was always reading. His watch. His slippers. "Walter," she called out, frowning. No answer. Downstairs, the silence was jarring. No smell of coffee. No creak of the cabinet. She padded through the kitchen barefoot, expecting to see him by the stove. Nothing. No car in the driveway. Just a strange stillness. She reached for her laptop. Maybe he emailed. Instead, the screen flashed an error. No internet connection. Frowning deeper now, she checked the modem. Unplugged. Cord missing. Her phone lit up, charging now, and a flurry of bank notifications flooded the lock screen. Chase alert. Your account ending in 9321 has a balance of $0. Fidelity. Annuity plan updated. Access limited. Bank of America. Joint account closed. Insufficient signatures for reopen. Her blood turned cold. Upstairs, Hannah's bedroom door slammed open. "Mom," she shrieked. "What the hell?" "My tuition payment bounced." "Bounced? What?" Linda's mouth went dry. Hannah's face was beet red. Phone clutched like a weapon. "I was registering for fall, and it just declined. They locked me out of the damn portal." From the hallway, Jace stormed out, phone to his ear. "Yeah, this is Jace Granger. I'm telling you I made my payment 2 weeks ago." "What do you mean it was reversed?" "What repo?" He turned to them, eyes wild. "My car just got taken." "What do you mean taken?" Linda said, heart thudding. "Gone. Hooked it up to a damn truck right outside the gym. The lady said the lease was canceled. Walt's name was on it." Hannah's jaw dropped. "You gotta be kidding me." "Wait. Where is Dad?" Linda didn't answer. She ran back upstairs, threw open the closet. Half of it was missing. His suits. His tools. His documents. She rushed to the drawer where she kept the property deed. Empty. Jace appeared behind her. "What the hell is going on?" I don't know," Linda stammered. But she did. A cold realization hit her in the stomach like a punch. Downstairs, her laptop pinged. A single email notification. She ran to it, eyes shaking. From Walt.Granger@protonmail.com. Subject: Goodbye. Linda, you broke something that can't be fixed. I hope the party was worth it. Walt, she stared at it, then reread it, then sat down hard on the kitchen stool, mouth open, unable to breathe. Hannah looked over her shoulder. He emailed you? Linda didn't respond. Hannah's voice sharpened. What the hell does that mean? What did he do? Jace ran into the living room, flipping through documents. The deed's missing. I can't find the lease info either. Mom, what is happening? Linda just stared at the screen, hands trembling. The cursor blinked beneath Walt's final sentence. Mocking. Final. I see. Her phone vibrated again. Another failed tuition transaction. Hannah began to scream. Jace kicked the coffee table. Linda sat perfectly still, the words repeating in her mind like a siren in reverse. You broke something that can't be fixed. I hope the party was worth it. And in the corner of the room, on the coffee table, her phone buzzed again. Incoming call, one of 243 missed. Walter Burner. Chapter 5. The Fallout. The roses Linda's new man had left in the kitchen vase 3 nights ago were drooping, petals littering the table like evidence in a crime scene. She stared at them as if they might offer her answers. He hadn't called since Tuesday. Not a single text. No good morning message. No winking emoji. No weekend getaway plans to the winery in Sonoma. Nothing. Her fingers trembled as she tapped his contact, marked his kiss emoji, and listened to the ringing. It went straight to voicemail. Again. This was the 4th time today. She tried texting. Hey baby, just want to check in. Can't wait for this new chapter. No response. She hesitated, then scrolled to her old messages with Walt. There was no heart emoji. No pet names. Just years of logistics. Need anything from the store? Gas bill came, paid it. Dinner's in the fridge. She suddenly felt nauseated. Upstairs, Hannah shrieked, loud enough to shake the chandelier. Linda jumped, bolting up the stairs. Hannah? What's going on? Her daughter stood in front of her laptop, cheeks red, hair a mess. I got fired. What? For what? Hannah sniffled. I told my manager she was a useless cow and maybe slapped a file out of her hand. She was giving me attitude. Linda blinked. Why would you? She said I came in late 3 times this week and called me unreliable. Like, excuse me, I'm dealing with a family crisis. Linda didn't know what to say. Instead, she sat on the edge of the bed, numb. Downstairs, the door slammed. Jay stumbled in, wearing one shoe and a torn t-shirt. His eye was swollen. His breath reeked of vodka and bad decisions. What happened to you? Linda asked, alarmed. He collapsed onto the couch. Cops grabbed me outside Jake's bar. Said I pissed on a mailbox or something. Jesus, Jace, whatever, he muttered. Bailed myself out with what little I had left. Can't even Uber anymore. My card's dead. Dad cut off everything. Hannah marched in, mascara smudged, face twisted. We need to get him to talk to us. I mean, seriously, he's being childish. Jace laughed bitterly. Oh, he's being childish? Says the girl who made a TikTok saying, I hope my old man enjoys sleeping in a cardboard box. He leaned forward. You realize he was the one paying your tuition, right? I thought we were going to get the pension. Hannah snapped. I thought we had a plan. Yeah, well, clearly Dad had a better plan. They all went quiet. Then Hannah huffed and stormed off. Jace lit a cigarette right in the living room. Linda didn't stop him. She just picked up her phone and dialed Walt. Voicemail. Again. She tried again. Still nothing. She scrolled to his old messages. Nothing had changed. No read receipts. No typing dots. Just a wall of silence. She licked her lips, then hit record. Her voice cracked as she began. Walt, baby, I know you're upset. I get it. It was a mistake. Emotions were high. The kids got carried away. I got carried away. Her voice trembled, desperate now. You've always been the steady one. The provider. The man who kept this family together. Maybe I didn't appreciate it. I was scared of growing old, okay? I thought I needed something exciting, but that was stupid. So stupid. She paused, breathing heavily. Please come home. We need you. I need you. She pressed send. Upstairs, Hannah slammed another door. 10 minutes later, Linda watched her daughter redo her makeup, angle her phone, and hit record in selfie mode. Hey guys, this is a hard video to make, she said, voice thick with mock sorrow. I just want to say if you see my dad, Walter Granger. Tell him his family is sorry. We messed up. We love you, Dad. Please come back. She blew a kiss at the camera. Added crying filter. Uploaded. 5 minutes later, the comments began rolling in. Girl, you laughed in his face at his own retirement? Sit down. This ain't the apology you think it is. Your dad deserves better. Hannah threw her phone across the room. FK the internet. Linda didn't flinch. She had just received another notice. Default on utility payment. Service may be interrupted. She picked up her phone and called again. Still voicemail. This time, she didn't even try to be composed. You're ruining everything, Walter, she screamed into the line. Everything. You think this makes you noble? You think starving your own children makes you a man? I gave you my life, and this is how you pay me back. You bitter, spineless coward, come back and face me. She hung up. Somewhere, hundreds of miles away, in a quiet rental cabin nestled deep in the woods, Walt sat by a crackling fireplace. He stared at the burner phone as it vibrated for the 243rd time. The voicemail alert popped up. He tapped it open. Listened. Linda's voice filled the room, shrill and angry, breaking and snarling. You're ruining everything. Walt looked out the frosted window, watching snow fall gently across the dark pines. He reached for the phone, deleted the message. Chapter 6. Elena. The coastal town of Hallow Ridge was a whisper of a place, a haven of sea wind, old bookstores, creaky docks, and the kind of peace that made it easy to forget the rest of the world existed. Walt Granger rented a modest cottage a few streets up from the ocean. The front porch overlooked dune grass and mist, and the nights were so quiet he could hear the wind chimes 2 houses over. He rose each morning with the sun, just as he always had, but now there was no coffee to make for Linda. No errands for the house. No children calling with needs wrapped in guilt. Just silence. And, oddly, relief. He spent his days walking the beach or reading on a bench near the harbor. There was a little cafe called Rosewater, a cozy place run by a cheerful woman named Patty who served cinnamon rolls so good they felt illegal. It was there, on a rainy Tuesday morning, that he first saw her. She sat alone near the window, a paperback folded in her hands, glasses sliding down her nose. She had silver-streaked auburn hair tied back in a loose bun, wore an olive sweater and faded jeans, and her presence didn't demand attention so much as it invited it, quietly. Patty saw him hesitate and smiled. You should talk to her, she said. She's got the same look you do. What look is that? Patty smirked. Someone who remembers how to hurt quietly. He chuckled, then sighed. That obvious, huh? Patty shrugged. To me. He ordered his usual coffee and cinnamon roll, then turned, stealing another glance. She looked up, caught him, and smiled. He nodded politely. She waved toward the chair opposite her. Would you like to sit? She asked, her voice soft but confident. Walt hesitated, then took the seat. I'm Elena, she said, holding out her hand. Walt. Nice to meet you, Walt. You live around here. Just moved in. Up on Harborview. Oh, the cottage with the blue shutters. I walk past that place every morning. I'm usually out front, reading. Then I've missed you, she smiled. Their conversation began with books, shifted to the weather, then veered into deeper territory without warning, grief, aging, the odd feeling of invisibility that crept in after 60. I was a nurse for 30 years, Elena said, sipping her tea. Lost my husband 6 years ago. Cancer. He was charming and dishonest in equal measure. The day before he died, I found out about the second account. The other apartment. Walt raised his eyebrows slightly. I stayed through it, she said. And after. But I learned something in the silence after he was gone. What was that? I wasn't grieving the man, just the years I gave him. Walt looked down at his coffee, that old ache stirring. Elena didn't pry. She didn't ask the obvious questions. That's what made it easier to speak. I retired 3 weeks ago, Walt said slowly. Worked 45 years. Built bridges. Ran crews. Managed disasters. I thought I'd spend the rest of my life in peace. And instead, they handed me divorce papers at my own retirement dinner. His voice was even, but his hands curled slightly on the table. My wife. My kids. They laughed. Called me a loser. Said they were taking everything. Elena didn't gasp, didn't wince. She just nodded gently. I'm so sorry, Walt. I signed, he continued, eyes distant. I didn't say a word. I left. I made sure they got nothing. Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt shared. She reached across the table and gently touched his hand. Warm, soft, grounding. You didn't deserve any of that, she said. Walt looked in her eyes, clear, kind, weathered by her own storms. But I'm glad you're here now. Chapter 7. Reclamation. The sun kissed the tide as it rolled into the quiet shore of Hallow Ridge. Walt stood on the deck of a modest sailboat, his boat now gently gripping the rail as the wind tousled his thinning hair. A gull cried overhead, its call sharp and free. He breathed in salt and peace. It was hard to believe how recently his life had been built on obligation and illusion. That world, the house, the forced smiles at dinner, the empty praise felt like a bad dream now. These days, Walt woke up when he wanted to. He made coffee for himself, and sometimes Elena, if she stayed over after one of their long evening walks. They'd fallen into a rhythm, easy and unspoken. Two survivors in the quiet aftermath of betrayal, choosing tentatively, carefully, to start again. The scars were still there. Some mornings, he'd catch himself checking the account balances, making sure everything was still his. Other times, a simple knock at the door would raise his heart rate. The trauma hadn't vanished. It had simply been taught to sit quietly beside him. But healing? Healing was happening. He'd started writing again. Just a little blog at first, under a pen name. Thoughts about loyalty, aging, rebuilding. To his surprise, readers found it. Men from across the country emailed him. Fathers, husbands, divorced men, betrayed men. Some bitter, some broken, all craving the same thing, dignity. He gave it back to them, one post at a time. Elena encouraged him. I like when you write about the quiet things, she said once, curled beside him on the porch. Not just the pain, but the peace that came after. It reminds people there's a life beyond the wreckage. That night, he wrote the line that would be shared more than any other. What they burn down doesn't matter. What you build next, that's who you are. He wasn't trying to inspire anyone. He was just trying to make sense of the rubble. But maybe he thought that was enough. Meanwhile, miles away, in the shell of the life they used to share, Linda sat hunched at the kitchen table. The lights were off. The house, stripped of warmth, felt like a tomb. She clutched an envelope in trembling hands. Inside was a single photograph. Walt smiling, tan, alive, standing proudly on a sailboat. A handwritten caption beneath it. Retired, loved, and free. She let out a small sound, half sob, half choke, and pressed the photo to her chest. The silence answered her. Her new man, the co-worker she'd whispered with behind Walt's back, had ghosted the moment her accounts froze. When she tried to contact him, he blocked her. Turns out, he'd been seeing 2 other women at the same time. Walt wasn't the only old fool being used. Her mistake? She gambled her life away for a man who never even bet on her. Hannah wasn't home. She worked the late shift at a diner on Route 6, wiping down sticky booze and forcing a smile at truckers who called her sweetheart. The degree Walt had paid for, communications, or something equally vague, had meant nothing in the job market when she got fired for insubordination. Apparently, slapping your manager wasn't considered leadership material. She hadn't spoken to Linda in 3 days. Jace wasn't doing much better. He worked retail now, folding jeans and pretending not to care when his old high school buddies walked past pretending not to know him. He'd once told Walt he deserved a Porsche for graduation. Now, he was saving up for used tires on a beat-up Civic. None of them had seen Walt since that night, but they all saw the aftermath. The pension was gone, protected. The accounts had been drained, legally, before the divorce papers ever hit the table. The house, sold through a trust. The equity, moved into an annuity Walt controlled, inaccessible to anyone else. Even the dog, the one Linda had let him walk but never fed, had been given to a neighbor. She hadn't just lost her husband. She'd lost the illusion of control. Now, she sat alone, in silence, with a photo pressed to her chest. A quiet moan escaped her lips. Please, she whispered, come back. I didn't mean it. I didn't think. but she had. She meant every word that night at the retirement party. She remembered the glee in Hannah's voice, the way Jace had toasted his own father's humiliation. She remembered her own smug smirk as Walt signed the papers without blinking. They thought they'd won. They never thought he'd walk away. Walt closed his laptop. He just finished a new post. The difference between being alone and being free. He stood and walked out to the porch, where Elena sat with a blanket around her shoulders, a glass of red wine in her hand. "You look peaceful," she said with a smile. "I am," Walt replied, lowering himself into the chair beside her. The wind played through the trees. Somewhere down the road, wind chimes sang. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. He chuckled, "Just remembering how quiet it was the first day I got here. I thought it would crush me. And now I think it's saved me." She reached over, took his hand in hers. "You saved yourself, Walt." He looked at her, grateful. And for the first time in a very long time, he believed her. Chapter 8. Legacy. The mornings in Seabrook had grown cooler, but Walt didn't mind. He liked the chill. It sharpened the senses. Reminded him he was alive, that this new life wasn't a dream. He sat at his desk, coffee steaming beside his laptop, a wool cardigan draped over his shoulders. On the screen blinked the final chapter of his manuscript. He stared at the blinking cursor, then typed the words. "You don't need to get even. You just need to get free." With a deep breath, he saved the document and leaned back in his chair. Understood. A man's guide to losing everything and finding more was done. He hadn't set out to write a book. At first, it was just journaling. Scattered reflections typed in solitude, then shared anonymously on a modest blog. But when one of his entries, "How to Disappear with Dignity," gained traction, the emails began. Men from everywhere, some in their 20s, some in their 60s. Engineers, mechanics, veterans, teachers, all with the same story written in different ink. Betrayal, abandonment, humiliation. "You made me feel seen. I thought I was the only one. Your story kept me from doing something stupid." He hadn't expected that. The first time a man said Walt's blog helped keep him alive during divorce, Walt stared at the screen for 10 minutes, unable to type back. But eventually he did. And when another reader asked if he'd consider collecting his thoughts into something longer, he took the challenge. That had been 7 months ago. Now, the manuscript was complete. Edited, proofed, formatted. He'd opted to self-publish. No flashy marketing campaign. No ghostwriters. Just his voice. Raw, weathered, real. He sipped his coffee and watched a group of seagulls squabble over a piece of driftwood outside the window. The ocean crashed just beyond, its rhythm steady and unbothered. Later that morning, he logged into his mentorship group. It had started with just 3 young engineers who found his blog. Now it was a bi-weekly Zoom gathering of 15 men, some fresh out of college, others struggling through burnout or layoffs. The call buzzed to life. "Morning, Mr. Granger," came a cheerful voice. It was Owen, a 24-year-old from Nebraska, who reminded Walt of a younger, more hopeful version of himself. "Morning, Owen," Walt replied, smiling warmly. "How's the cooling system project coming?" "Almost there. I applied that tip you gave about airflow modeling. It cut my margin of error by 15%. The chat lit up with clapping emojis. They spent the next hour talking designs, job stress, office politics. But near the end, it always circled back to something deeper. "How do you stay grounded when people walk all over you?" One of the newer members asked. "I feel like being dependable just makes you disposable." Walt was quiet for a moment. Then, "You stay grounded by remembering your worth doesn't come from who uses you. It comes from who respects you." A few men nodded. One wiped his eyes. That afternoon, Walt met Elena at the Harbor Cafe. She waved at him from a shaded table, the sea breeze fluttering the pages of a paperback she wasn't really reading. "Finished it," he said, sliding into the chair across from her. "The book?" He nodded. "All done. Uploaded it this morning." Her face lit up. "Walt, that's amazing. I'm so proud of you." He gave a modest smile, brushing the compliment aside. "It's not exactly a literary masterpiece." "No," she said gently, reaching across the table for his hand. "It's something better. It's true." They sipped iced tea and watched the waves crash beyond the pier. Children giggled nearby. A dog barked joyfully as it chased after a thrown tennis ball. Walt looked at Elena, her silver-streaked hair tucked behind one ear, her expression soft but strong. She'd been through her own version of hell. A husband who'd cheated, then died before they'd even had the closure of a real conversation. She hadn't wallowed. She'd grieved, healed, and started again, just like him. Later, they walked along the boardwalk, the planks creaking under their steps, the ocean whispering beside them. They reached their usual bench, overlooking the Tittapools, and sat in silence for a while. Walt pulled out his phone and scrolled through the reviews already trickling in. 5 stars. This book saved me. Every chapter was like looking into a mirror. I wish my dad had read this before he gave up on himself. He pocketed the phone. Elena glanced over. You okay? He nodded. Yeah, just processing. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she asked, do you regret not fighting harder for them? Your family, I mean. Walt didn't answer right away. The waves crashed. A breeze tousled his collar. I regret trusting the wrong people, he said at last, his voice calm. But not walking away. Elena didn't press him. She simply leaned her head on his shoulder. A peaceful stillness settled over them as the sky turned amber. Walt closed his eyes. For years, he'd given everything, his money, his time, his devotion, to people who had only seen him as a means to an end. But in the end, they taught him the most powerful lesson of his life. Sometimes the most powerful thing a man can say is nothing at all.